Welcome to Wednesday, What If, by the storyteller. What if Wednesday Addams was a witch, just like her ancestor, Goody Addams? What if Wednesday was called upon by Goody when her powers started manifesting a year earlier than in the original timeline, and she met Tyler before Miss Thornhill, aka Laura Gates? Like, comment and subscribe to be updated. Chapter 16. As the soft crackling of the books burning filled the room, the pungent scent of smoke curled in the air, blending with the earthy aroma of dried herbs. Adele methodically placed the ashes into mason jars, each one meticulously labeled with the name of the book she had just destroyed. The process was almost ritualistic, a reminder of the careful control the Addams family exerted over their secrets. Wednesday stood by, her expression unreadable, as she watched the flames consume each book. It was strangely calming, destroying something that had been hidden away for so long. But her mind, as ever, was always several steps ahead, calculating, planning, searching for the next piece of the puzzle. Adele, sensing the shift in her cousin's attention, broke the silence. "You know, Wednesday," she began, her voice smooth and almost casual, "there's something I need to bring to your attention." Wednesday's gaze shifted to her cousin. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything, waiting for Adele to continue. Adele smirked as she tossed another book into the fire. "There's a new club here at Nevermore. Beekeeping, of all things. A freshman started it. His name's Eugene." "Beekeeping?" Wednesday echoed flatly, her gaze turning to the dark, humming cauldron in the corner. "Is this another one of your extracurricular suggestions?" Adele didn't flinch at the sarcasm. "You need an extracurricular activity, Wednesday. You can't just keep hiding behind your fencing." Principal Weems was clear. "If you want to keep your freedom, you need to broaden your social horizons." She tossed a few more ashes into another mason jar, her eyes glinting with sharp intent. "So, I've decided. You're joining the beekeeping club. Pugsley, too." Pugsley, the slightly chubby, always eager younger Addams, had been in and out of the witch's lair since school started, often taking advantage of their family's eccentricities. Wednesday could almost picture him grinning in anticipation already. "Why would I waste my time with bees?" Wednesday asked, her voice skeptical, but laced with resignation. She wasn't thrilled by the prospect, but there was always an ulterior motive behind Adele's decisions. Adele gave her a knowing look. "Because you need something other than just your fencing, Wednesday. Think of it as collateral." She leaned in, her voice quiet but firm. "There are only 3 members in the club, you, Pugsley, and Eugene." Wednesday's mind started to churn. A small club with only 3 members? That could be useful. "So it's just the 3 of us?" She glanced at the jars of ashes. "Is this about keeping me busy, or is there something more?" Adele's lips curled into an almost imperceptible smile. "It's about both, actually. Principal Weems wants you to interact more with your peers, and beekeeping is as good a way as any to meet that requirement." Her gaze narrowed slightly. "But it's also about Pugsley. He's itching to get involved, and frankly, he needs something to focus on that's less chaotic than his usual pursuits." "I'm not babysitting him, Adele," Wednesday replied dryly, glancing at her younger brother in the next room as he was likely creating some form of mess, his laughter already echoing through the halls. "No, you're not," Adele agreed, her voice tinged with amusement. "But think of Eugene as a second Pugsley. A slightly more socially awkward one, I'd wager. The same kind of disconnection you both seem to share. You might find him useful in his own way. And I'm not asking you to get too involved. Just participate." Wednesday paused, considering this. Eugene was another outsider, a freshman, with whom she had little to no history. But she did know one thing: he had a strange energy. The same kind of strange that made her, well, her. And he had started a club. In a place like Nevermore, that had to mean something. "You think I should, what? Bond with him over bees?" Wednesday asked, her tone still deadpan, but with a glimmer of curiosity creeping into her voice. Adele nodded, her smirk widening. Exactly. If you're going to do this, Wednesday, you might as well make it interesting. You two might actually get along better than you think. Pugsley can tag along for his own amusement, of course. She gave a pointed glance toward the other side of the room, where Pugsley was now trying to balance a jar on his head, clearly lost in his own little world. But you won't have to spend much time with Eugene, not unless you want to, Adele added, her tone softening just a fraction. You'll just show up. For Weems. For me. And for Pugsley, who's all too eager to join something that involves stinging insects. Wednesday's lips quirked, a small but genuine smile, tugging at the corners of her mouth. Fine. I'll join the beekeeping club. But only because it seems irritating enough to keep my attention. Adele gave a satisfied nod. Good. And remember, Wednesday, she added, her voice carrying the weight of a deeper understanding, you don't need to be friends with Eugene. You just need to observe. See what he's really about. You're not here to make real connections. Just, take note. Wednesday nodded slowly, her mind already processing the potential. Noted. With a final glance at the last book burning in the cauldron, Adele added, you'll find that in this school, everyone has their own hive. And not all of them are as innocent as they seem. As the room settled into a tense quiet, filled only with the crackle of the fire, Wednesday felt the familiar weight of a new task on her shoulders. Beekeeping was hardly a fitting distraction for someone of her talents, but it was just another game to play. One with stingers, no less. And Wednesday Addams was never one to back down from a challenge. As Pugsley and Wednesday approached the beekeeping club's designated area, Wednesday found herself a little more intrigued than she expected. The shed sat at the far edge of the school grounds, nestled between a cluster of trees. Surrounded by a dozen beehives, the scene looked peaceful, if a bit unconventional for a school club. The soft buzz of bees filled the air, and the sun shone through the trees, casting a dappled light over the hives. It was far more serene than most places at Nevermore, and Wednesday found the stillness oddly comforting. Pugsley, on the other hand, was practically bouncing with excitement. Isn't this awesome, Wednesday? You're gonna love it. I can't wait to show you the bees up close. Wednesday raised an eyebrow. I don't mind insects, Pugsley, she said dryly. But let's keep the excitement contained. This is a beekeeping club, not a circus. Pugsley, undeterred, continued to skip along toward the shed. I know. But Eugene's got all this cool bee stuff set up, and I want to help him out. It's like a secret society for bees. He laughed at the thought, looking over his shoulder at his sister. You can't tell me that isn't awesome. I suppose it's intriguing enough, Wednesday replied, her voice cool but with a hint of curiosity. She'd always had a fascination with creatures, especially the ones that others would run away from. Spiders, scorpions, and even the occasional snake. Her last pet, a tarantula named Nero, had been a calming presence in her room for a time. She had always liked the quiet, methodical movements of such creatures. Perhaps bees would offer the same sense of peace. As they reached the shed, they were greeted by the sight of Eugene. He was just inside, bending over a table, working on something with a jar of honeycomb and a set of delicate tools. Eugene looked up when they approached. He was a little taller than Pugsley, with a mop of brown, unruly hair that seemed to stick out in every direction. His glasses were large and slightly askew on his face, but his eyes held a quiet intensity, the kind that only came when someone was fully absorbed in something they cared about. He straightened up at the sight of them, giving a shy, wide grin. Oh, hey. Pugsley, you brought your sister. Nice to meet you, Wednesday. Eugene extended a hand, his voice a little soft but genuine. I'm Eugene. You ready to check out the bees? Wednesday glanced at his hand, then shook it firmly, offering a small, neutral smile in return. She couldn't help but notice that Eugene's awkwardness was almost familiar. The way his movements were a bit stiff, his eyes darting between Pugsley and herself, it reminded her of herself in social situations. She realized, with a start, that Eugene had the same kind of social disorder she did, though it manifested in a more mild, nervous energy. Pugsley practically bounced on his feet beside her. Eugene is the best, Wednesday. He knows everything about bees. He started the club and everything. Really? Wednesday asked, her voice dry, but her interest piqued. Beekeeping, huh? Yeah. It's kind of a hidden hobby, you know? But bees are important. They're, essential for pollination. And, you can make honey. Eugene's enthusiasm was growing, though still tinged with a nervous excitement. But mostly, they're peaceful. The bees, I mean. If you respect them, they won't bother you. I don't mind the bees. Wednesday's voice was calm as she surveyed the hives from the doorway. But I'm not here for honey. I'm here because it's apparently a club, and Pugsley's enthusiasm is contagious. She glanced down at Pugsley, who was grinning as he slid into an oversized beekeeping suit, looking like a cheerful, overstuffed teddy bear. Eugene smiled back at her, clearly relieved that she wasn't dismissing the club outright. Yeah, I get it. Most people think it's kinda weird. But, I don't know, bees are fascinating. They have this, order to them that's calming, you know? Order is a good thing, Wednesday agreed, her voice softening slightly. I like order. And I like the quiet. Pugsley, still excited, tugged at Eugene's sleeve. Can we see them, Eugene? Can we see the hives? I wanna, poke at the bees. He laughed a little maniacally. No poking, Pugsley, Wednesday said, rolling her eyes, but with a ghost of a smile. We're observing. That's all. Eugene nodded enthusiastically, adjusting his glasses as he began to prepare a suit for Wednesday. Right. No poking. Just observing. So, I'll show you around. I've got the hives all set up. We're gonna do a little inspection today. You just gotta be careful when opening them, 'cause the bees get a little excited sometimes. You mean angry, Wednesday replied with a smirk. Eugene hesitated, his face turning pink. Well, I mean, yeah. But they're good bees. They don't like being disturbed, but if you stay calm, they'll stay calm. Pugsley grabbed a beekeeping suit and threw it on, even though it was several sizes too big. I'm ready. Let's see the bees. All right, Eugene said, stepping aside to let them in. Follow me, and, be careful around the hives. They're delicate, you know? Wednesday followed Eugene with a steady pace, her eyes glinting with quiet intrigue as they approached the first beehive. Pugsley was already poking his head into the hive, excitement radiating from him like a beacon. You're sure this is safe? Wednesday asked, raising an eyebrow as she studied the bees' movements from a distance. Eugene nodded eagerly. Yeah. It's totally safe. Just don't do anything to make them think you're a threat. Wednesday glanced at Eugene. I've handled more dangerous creatures than bees, Eugene. Don't worry about me. He blinked, looking surprised at her calm demeanor, then smiled. Well, in that case, I'm sure you'll be fine. I think you'll like it here. I'm sure I will, Wednesday replied, her gaze lingering on the hives as the bees continued their steady, rhythmic movements. There was something soothing about it, the order, the collective effort. It was, in a strange way, an environment she could get used to. Pugsley was already asking Eugene a barrage of questions about honey production, and Wednesday found herself listening to Eugene's responses with more interest than she had expected. It was clear that Eugene, like her brother, had a certain social awkwardness, but there was something to be said about the way he had found his niche in a world of bees. And maybe, just maybe, she could find her own peace here as well. All right, she said, turning to Pugsley. Let's see what all the fuss is about. Eugene gave a small, shy smile as they moved to the next hive. You'll see. It's kind of magical. Wednesday wasn't sure if she believed in magic, but she wasn't about to dismiss the idea just yet. There was something about the quiet hum of the bees that made everything else feel secondary. And for once, that wasn't a bad thing. Wednesday walked into the weather vane, the familiar chime of the door signaling her arrival. Tyler looked up from behind the counter, a slight smile tugging at his lips. He noticed her usual air of cool detachment, but something seemed off today. She was quieter, more contemplative. "Morning, Wednesday," Tyler greeted her, already beginning to set up her coffee without needing to ask. "The usual, right?" "Yes." Her voice was flat, though there was a slight edge to it that he could pick up on. "A quad." Tyler was quick with the preparation, though his eyes lingered on her for a moment as he worked. He had been told by his dad, warned was more accurate, to stay away from Wednesday. His father's words still echoed in his mind, "She's trouble, Tyler." Outcasts always are. Tyler had brushed it off at first, thinking it was just his dad's usual prejudice. But the more he thought about it, the more he felt uncomfortable, especially knowing the weight that came with being an outcast in a town like Jericho, where the lines of social division were as clear as day. Yet, there was no reason to distance himself from Wednesday. She was different, sure. But that was exactly why Tyler liked spending time with her. She wasn't trying to fit into any mold, and he could respect that. No one else in town had the same level of honesty about who they were, least of all him. He set the steaming cup of coffee in front of her. "Something on your mind?" Tyler asked, his tone casual, but with a hint of concern. "You look like you've been dealing with something more than just schoolwork." Wednesday gave a small, dry smile and took the cup from him. She stood there for a moment, as if weighing whether to indulge him or keep her thoughts to herself. Finally, she spoke, her voice as flat as usual, but with a subtle undercurrent of annoyance. "Adele signed me up for the beekeeping club." Tyler's eyebrows raised slightly, though he couldn't suppress the small chuckle that escaped him. "Beekeeping? Really? That's a new one." He leaned against the counter, trying not to look too amused. "Yes." Wednesday's voice was dry, and she glanced around the cafe briefly before locking eyes with him. "She thinks it will help me socialize, or something. I suppose I should thank her for forcing me into extracurricular activities. Apparently, fencing isn't enough." Tyler nodded thoughtfully, the humor still lingering in his eyes. "Yeah, because bees are definitely the next logical step to make you more social." He paused. "You don't seem thrilled. I take it you're not a fan of beekeeping?" "I prefer a quad," she replied matter-of-factly, taking a sip of her coffee. "Less human interaction." "But no. Apparently, socializing involves being surrounded by insects and Eugene." Her tone was flat again as she mentioned the freshman who'd started the club. "Pugsley is excited, of course. But me? I'm not sure what I'm supposed to learn from this hobby. I'm used to being left to my own devices, not volunteering for anything." Tyler grinned, leaning in a little. "You'll survive. It's not like you're exactly helpless when it comes to, well, anything." He chuckled. "But seriously, how bad can it be? Just don't let the bees get too attached. Or, get too attached to the bees." She gave him a brief, wry smile. "I don't mind insects. I once had a pet scorpion named Nero." Tyler's grin widened at the mention of her old pet. "I'm guessing that didn't make the best house pet, huh?" "Not exactly," Wednesday replied. "But you can't deny the charm of a creature that will only leave you alone if you leave it alone." There was a brief silence, and Tyler could sense the change in the air. Wednesday was always a little more guarded when the conversation veered too close to the subject of people. He'd seen her retreat behind her walls before, the slight unease that seemed to settle in when she was expected to deal with emotions or social obligations. Before he could say anything else, Wednesday spoke again, her voice quieter. "Adele only did this because Principal Weems is convinced I need more social exposure. She's under the impression that my personal development would benefit from such activities." Wednesday mimicked the principal's tone, sarcastically, rolling her eyes. "I'm perfectly content as I am." Tyler chuckled, the humor now replaced with a more genuine, soft expression. I know the feeling. Everyone's always trying to change you, even when there's nothing to fix. His eyes darkened a little, the thought of his own family's expectations clouding his mood for a moment. He cleared his throat, trying to keep things light. But hey, at least you'll have a good excuse to avoid other social events, right? Like prom or whatever. Wednesday's lips curved ever so slightly at the idea, her eyes glinting with a faint amusement. If I'm forced to sit through a dance, I may have to burn the building down. So, no, I don't think I'll be attending prom anytime soon. Tyler grinned. That's the Wednesday I know. So, what's your next move in this beekeeping ordeal? I'm not entirely sure, Wednesday said, her tone turning contemplative. Perhaps I'll observe for a while before forming an opinion. But I don't think I'll ever be a bee enthusiast. Fair enough. Tyler watched her closely, his expression softening. You don't have to be. Just try to make it through without turning the bees into your next pet project, okay? Wednesday's eyes gleamed, as if considering the idea. Perhaps I'll make them my silent companions. Less work that way. Tyler leaned back, giving her a knowing smile. As long as you don't start making honeycomb-shaped weapons, I'm good with that. Don't give me any ideas, Tyler. She smirked as she took another sip of her coffee, the brief moment of levity fading into the usual calmness that surrounded her. As they stood there, a quiet understanding passed between them. Tyler knew that Wednesday would handle whatever came her way, as she always did. Even if it meant enduring something as bizarre as a beekeeping club. And despite what his dad said, he had no intention of staying away. With Wednesday, things made sense, at least in a way that felt more real than anything else in Jericho. Like, comment, and subscribe to be notified for updates on this series.